Thank you all for the kind words. It's so nice to hear all that. I've been working for 23 years now as coach, and all of my work is really focused on two things: helping people connect more deeply and helping people influence more positively. And so if you have a need in your work or in your life to connect with people more deeply or to influence others in a more positive way, whether you're in sales or management or wherever, well, that's the kind of thing I've tried to focus on understanding. What is it that makes a human being useful to another human being? What is it that connects a human being to another? And so we talk about it in certain ways in the sales space. We talk about it differently when we're working with senior managers of corporations, for example, or something like that. But it always comes back to the same thing. How can you create value with another person? How can you somehow understand and align and leverage yourself with that other person in a way that pays dividends for either that person, your client, let's say, or both of you? So I'm delighted to hear there's any positivity that comes out of these conversations. And I love to hear that people are talking about these things after our calls are over. None of this work is work that's really easy or simple. You can't just sit in one session and get it all. It's an endless, search or exploration for value for you and me and for all of us. So let's continue that work right now. Lovely to see everybody this morning. We're going to pick up on last week's call. Last time we were talking about routines. We're talking about habits and the importance of managing the habitual parts of your life effectively. Today, we're going to continue that conversation and broaden it out a little bit. One of the things we said last time was when the consequence of our doing something or not doing something is immediate and definite or certain, chances are we have the incentive we need to either do something or not do something. So I gave the example, for example, of like a person, I don't know if I mentioned this last time or not, but, if there's a huge sign that says, don't touch this fence, behind this fence is 50 million volts, you'll die instantly. If people see a huge sign that says that, they know pretty much that they're going to die and they're going to die instantly and they're not going to touch that fence. On the other hand, when things are uncertain and perhaps future oriented, for example, catching lung cancer is one way to explain why people might smoke when everybody knows that smoking is potentially quite deadly. It's not necessarily certain that you'll get lung cancer if you smoke. And even if you do, you won't get it today, probably. It's probably 20 or 30 years down the road. And same thing, the other example I gave was seatbelts. People don't put their seatbelts on, even though they know seatbelts save lives, because chances are you're not going to have an accident today. It doesn't happen very often. And you may never have one. Who knows? So the point is, we want to extend that kind of idea to a more general sense here. And that is, what is it that takes us out of our goals? So we talked last time about like setting a particular path, like working out at the gym or doing a time block in your business. And we say, because the consequence might not be certain and might not be immediate, it's very easy for us to say, I won't do it today. I'll focus on this other thing instead and get back to it tomorrow. But in a more broad sense, if we think outside of just those cases, what is our habit or our pattern of giving up on our plans or our intentions? We all set intentions in life, whether that's to sell X this year or to grow the business this year or to hit some other kind of professional target. And same things at home. My intention is to clean out my basement this weekend, or, get my kids to, don't dump their clothes on the floor, or whatever it is, right? We've always got those things going on in our mind. And to some degree, we give up on those things. And that's fine. Doesn't mean that every intention we ever set is the right one or a reasonable one. But what is our batting average when it comes to following through on our plans? If you look at your own business the last 5 years and you see all the goals that you set for yourself, I'm not asking you whether you achieved the goals or not. I'm asking you whether you gave up on any of those goals along the way. And there's a lot of factors in there, but I wanted to share a few things with you this morning as we think about this. So as usual, I'll share a couple of slides and we'll talk about it a little bit. Nope, that's not it. Why does that come up? All right, there we go. All right. What's going on when we make a plan and then give up on it? I'll take it as a basic premise that we create a plan for something because we believe that the target for that plan is worthy. That is, we've got a goal of some kind or an intended outcome of some kind, and that's appears to be valuable enough for us to create some kind of a plan or strategy and start walking down that path to get there. but we don't always get there. And sometimes we choose to not get there. So let's talk a little bit about how that works. First of all, to be successful with any plan in a very general sense, this is not related to business necessarily, but there's 4 pieces of it that need to happen for you to succeed with any kind of an intention. First, you need to be clear about what the goal is for yourself. You need to be clear about what success looks like, as Robert Refkin sometimes says. If you're not really clear about what that is, of course, you'll never get there. If somebody says, I want to have a good year next year, well, that's not a very clear goal. If you say, I want to sell 17 million next year, okay, that's a much clearer goal. Or if you say, I want to improve my sales by 5% next year, okay, that's pretty clear. Secondly, and this is a big one, you need to truly value that particular result. That is, we have lots of ideas and dreams that we think are kind of useful or good, but we're not necessarily committed to them. For example, some of us would like to lose a lot of weight. Some of us would like to learn a foreign language. Some of us would like to learn how to play golf. But we may not necessarily feel strongly enough about those things to actually be committed to following through. When you select a goal, what you're really saying is, I'm choosing to put up with all the difficulty and strife that's involved with me achieving that particular goal. And so there's millions of people in the world who've picked up the guitar one time or another, wanting to be a guitar player, or started playing piano or something like that. And sooner or later, they gave up on it without getting to the point that they might like to have gotten. So that tells me that while they valued the goal to some extent, they didn't necessarily value it enough to really stay committed to it. Third, you need a plan. The plan has to be actionable within your time resources, financial resources, and labor resources, whether it's you personally or part of people on your team. It has to be a workable plan. And finally, of course, you have to follow through on the plan. If you do these 4 things, you're almost certain that you're going to achieve your goals at a high clip. Being clear about what you want, being truly committed to it, having a plan that's really workable and actionable, given what's required and what your resources are, and following through. Right? In a general sense, these 4 things really matter. It's hard to be successful if you're missing one of these things or more of these things. So let me just ask you, put in the chat, what's one of these that you sometimes feel like maybe you don't do as well as you like? You sometimes may trip yourself up by one of these. Just put like 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat, just so we can see which one of these is the one that you think might be a bit of a liability for you personally. Are you sometimes not really clear about what the goal is? Or you say you want something, but you're not really committed? Or you struggle to create a great plan? Or you struggle to follow through on the plan? 3, 4, 4, 1, 4, 4, 1, 4. Got it. Okay. 3, 4, 4. Got it. Okay. So based on everybody's input here, then we really struggle with number 1 and number 4. And so we could talk about goal setting at another time. And we are talking about executing the plan right now. We talked about it last week, right? We learned something about ourselves last week in terms of executing a plan and how we can take ourselves out of a perfectly good time block, because the goal may not be, the consequences of not doing it are not necessarily immediate or certain. So let's continue a little bit further with this. What happens when we give up on a particular goal? If we break that process out into a graphic kind of depiction, this is what it could look like. You have the plan point, that's today. You say, I want to get somewhere. That's your desired outcome. I know where I am today. I know where I'd like to be at a certain point in the future. That's my desired outcome. And so I create some kind of a plan to get there. Right? So that's what we're talking about. You have a goal. You have sufficient commitment, or at least you think you do, and then you create a plan to get you there. And so you start moving down the track of this plan from where you are today to where you want to get to, according to whatever it is you've set for yourself as your approach or strategy. However, what so frequently happens here is somewhere along the way, we hit what we call a deviation point. A deviation point is where you make a conscious, or more commonly, an unconscious choice to give up on the desired outcome. And instead, you deviate to a substituted outcome. So an example of this might be, hey, I want to lose 20 pounds. And you get into it and you see how hard it is, and you don't want to give up all those sweets, or you don't really want to walk 3 miles a day. And you say, I don't need to lose 20 pounds, I'll just lose 10. Or if you say, I want to hit 40 million in sales next year, and you find out the first 6 months, it's really harder than you thought. You don't know how you're really going to get there. Maybe your plan wasn't as good as you thought it was. You're not really going to hit 40 million. You're not even going to hit 30 million. You'll be lucky if you hit 20 million. And then that's what you do. You say, whatever, 20 million. I guess I'll settle for 20 million. Of course, the problem with this is when you choose the substituted outcome, whether it's conscious or unconscious, at that moment, you lose the desired outcome. Now, we'll assume that the desired outcome was the number one desired outcome. That's why you chose it. That's why you created a plan. And the substituted outcome is a lesser value to you. That's why you didn't choose it in the first place. And so what we're saying here is you made a choice and a commitment at the beginning, at the plan point, and you had a goal and intention in mind, but you chose somewhere along the way to give up on it. And very often it's unconscious. And this is what we need to be aware of here is how often do I unconsciously choose to just give up on my goals or plans? It may be that you do that in your business. It may be that you do that in your personal life. If you open up the year and say, I want to read 12 books this year, and then you get into reading 12 books and you have to sit down every night and do it. And you know what? You don't really feel like doing it. And so you end up saying, well, maybe just make it 6 books this year. Nothing wrong with reading 6 books this year. But what we're looking at today is the choice, the mechanism that happens when we give up on a particular plan and choose a substituted outcome instead. Now, it may be that you have a habit of choosing goals that are outrageously optimistic and really beyond your particular resources. Or it may be that you choose an appropriate goal, but your planning is not sufficient. It's not making use of the resources in the right way to get you there. So when you look at this particular process and you say, okay, what's going on here? What do I need to think about? This is the key piece for you in leading yourself and your leading business. Ask yourself, do I habitually choose goals that are reasonable or unreasonable or slightly unreasonable or way out of line? If you tell me that you have chosen goals over the last 5 years and you've only achieved 5 or 10% of them, I'll say you've got a serious issue there and it's worth thinking about. Doesn't mean you're a bad person or a bad business person or anything like that. It just means that you're not achieving your intended outcomes, and we need to think a little bit more about why. And when you're thinking about this, you ask the second question, when or where have I chosen to give up on my desired outcomes? When we do this, we often see a particular pattern. It could be around sales in our business, or it could be around caring for ourselves. It could be around work-life balance. It could be around coming through and being there for our kids. It could be anywhere in our life, but often we find I'm really good at keeping to my commitments and achieving my goals in this part of my life. In this part of my life, I don't do so well. And finally, the key question is, why did I choose to deviate? Is this pattern something that's coming up in a lot of different places or one particular place? What am I choosing when I choose the deviated outcome or the substituted outcome versus the original one? This is a key piece of your success, folks. I know that most of what we do to be successful is doing stuff, but what we're talking about here is thinking stuff or reflecting. And if you can spend sufficient time reflecting and gaining one insight into how this pattern works for you, you've taken a huge step forward towards better success going forwards. So let's go a little bit further with this. When you reflect on this, you might come up with a bunch of insights or conclusions or some kind of new awareness about what's happening for you. Here's a few examples. I certainly don't want you to limit your thinking to these examples. They're just that. I really want to encourage you to think about this or talk with somebody about it who you trust and know, and think through this sufficiently over 2, 3, 4 weeks' time to figure out what is it that sometimes takes you out of your planning. The first one could be, you know what, I'm not patient beyond X hours or days. And that could be it. It could be as simple as that, folks. Like if I set a 2-week goal, I can do it. But if I set anything over 2 weeks, I'm screwed. If that's the awareness, that can totally change your business. Because then all you need to do is chunk everything down to 2-week length goals. Or if it's like hours, if you say, well, I'm really good at managing a 30-minute time block, but you know what? Whenever I get to 60 minutes, I always give up after 30, 35, 40 minutes, and I never finish. That's a really valuable insight to help you planning going forward. Secondly, I'm attracted to the biggest, best goals only. This is a very common one, especially in the sales world. People are so optimistic and they're so competitive and they throw the big numbers out there. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with big numbers and big ideas and big dreams. But what really matters is big results. And so if a dream fuels you, that's great. But you need a plan, you need the commitment, you need to execute, of course. I consistently underestimate the time needed for the task and the plan. This is a pretty common one. I thought I could get my newsletter out in an hour, but it actually took me 2.5 hours. Okay, well, if that keeps happening, we need to address that. And finally, of course, the big one, the squirrel syndrome. I'm attracted to the shiny new object. Somebody does something new, somebody says something new, there's a new book, there's a new group, there's a new, message from Chirag or me or somebody else, and you've abandoned everything else for the new thing. And so obviously, as we said last week, certain goals require a certain amount of attention and focus over time to be achieved. There's no other way to get there, including losing weight, including learning to play golf or learning to play the piano, some examples I shared last time. And so we need to master the ability not just to succeed in great bursts of energy and, show 3 houses and write 2 offers and do all these other things in 3 days flat. We also need to master the ability to do a little bit over time without being attracted to the shiny object. So you may find after you reflect on this a little bit that you have some version of one of these things or something else. But the point here is, if you walk away from reflecting with any of these insights or any other insights, you've set yourself up for a different result. Remember, a new awareness is the birth moment of a new result. And so that 30-minute rule, let's say you really recognize looking back that you really can't do anything for more than 30 minutes. And then you reorient your time in your business around 30-minute blocks. Then that's giving you the potential for a completely new result that you never had before when you were trying to do 60 or 90 or 2-hour blocks. It can be a game changer. The work is in the reflection. So how do you take action on this stuff this week? Quite easy. Block 30 minutes, first of all, to just reflect on those 3 questions. All right, I'll go back. I'll show you the questions again. Of course, this will be available to all of you later today or tomorrow on our platform, like everything is. Think about these particular questions and any other questions. These aren't the only ones, but this is where you can start. And ask yourself and stay in that exploration or in that inquiry, that reflection for 30 minutes. Don't check your phone, don't check your messages, turn your phone off and just spend some time. You can sit there and do it. You can walk while you do it. You can do it in the shower, wherever it makes sense for you to reflect, with the intention of coming up with some bit of awareness that you don't have right now, which might look like one of these things or something else. So start there, block 30 minutes. You can do it on your own, or you can have a partner to talk it through, maybe somebody in your business or another agent or somebody that you know well, they know you well. And keep thinking about it until you gain one clear insight about a pattern or a habit that you have around this stuff. If you decide that there's one single theme, which is I can't do anything for more than 30 minutes, then that's your solution. Everything's going to be 30 minutes or less. If you identify no theme or a couple of different things happening, then you probably need a couple of different responses. And so if that's the case, just choose one of those to work on. You don't have to fix them all at the same time. Choose one to work on and ask for that person, like talk with that person to figure out what your different approach could be. That person might be able to provide some input or some kind of valuable feedback on it. And then say, how long am I going to work on this? Let's say 2 weeks. Can I call you again in 2 weeks and let you know how it's gone for me? Could be 1 week, could be 2 weeks, could be a month. Doesn't really matter. Whatever your plan is, as you put a new approach into place, make sure that you book time in your calendar for a check-in assessment call. Now, you don't have to do this with someone else, but I suggest that you do for these reasons. One is, if it's a person you know and trust and like, that person could add some useful input. If not, at least telling it to somebody else kind of makes it real for you. And then there's the accountability piece that you need to go back to the person at the end of the 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever and say, I'm going to tell you how I did with this. Or maybe you could ask for your help. Maybe they need some help. Maybe you need some kind of a help with it. And if so, then they're there to provide it. Okay, so let's pull this down and talk about this a little bit. Question I want to ask all of you is, so take a look at these 4 and use this as a starting point. The last thing I want you to do is make a conclusion right now based on these four suggestions. But just take a look at them and let's talk a little bit if any of these relate to you in some way or they resonate for you in some way. And we're going to use that as a starting point for your reflections, not as a conclusion, because you haven't reflected enough yet. So let me ask you, which one of those, if any, resonates with you? Let's have a couple of you come off mute and we'll talk about this a little bit, please. Heath, take yourself off mute for a little bit and tell us why you select 3, please. Why does that kind of stand out for you?
Oh, because I always think that I can do more in less time. I always,
Yep.
Because I have that mentality of I bet on me, except for the fact that I forgot that it's not just me I'm dealing with most of the time.
Yep, got it. Thank you. So, that's a very common one. I mean, we all face it in life to some degree. You don't want it to be a big part of your life. You want it to be a relatively smaller part of your life. Robert Refkin famously said, and Chirag has mentioned this a couple of times, Chirag asked him, what do all entrepreneurs have in common? And Robert said, they are delusionally optimistic. And from my point of view, that delusional optimism is an incredibly valuable fuel, but it's also sometimes a poor decision maker.
So then it rotates into, wow, I didn't get done what I thought I was going to get done. So then I start fighting myself.
Yes, right. So then you jump on yourself like, God, why am I not managing this well as I should? Or I'm supposed to be the manager of this. I'm supposed to know what I'm doing and blah, 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 right? There's a lot of ways to pile on there. We definitely don't want that. Thank you, Keith. Let's hear from someone else. What's one that resonates for you? Let's hear from a couple more, please. All right. Should I call on somebody?
Yeah, David, this is Wayne. Yeah, three definitely resonates with me. Yesterday, I was reaching out to my sphere of influence, working in my CRM, and I was following the task, and then the task was telling me to do different things like send out a newsletter, go in and tag people. And I had to sit there and try to learn how to send a newsletter out, how to tag people, how to make notes. And that just ate up a lot of time. So it was like a huge learning curve yesterday for me.
Yep. Well, I'm glad to hear that. A new awareness is the birth moment of a new result for you, Wayne, and for everybody. And so, we may sometimes underestimate the time that it takes to complete a particular task, or we may not be paying attention that we've assigned ourselves 4 tasks at roughly the same time or the same day or something like that. Both of those cases require us to be more thoughtful about how we're planning our time and what we're planning to do with it. It may be that we just overestimate our ability to get things done, but we live in the world of reality. You have to learn from reality. If it takes you 3 hours to do let's say a newsletter, you look back over the last 6 months and every month you send out that newsletter and it's taking you about 3 hours to complete it each time, don't book 1 hour in your next time block and expect to get it done, right? You have to learn from reality. And so we have to have an accurate awareness of our capability for all these things. And to the extent that we don't, we suffer. So thank you for that, Wayne. Let's hear from someone else. Let's hear from someone who has one of the others other than number 3, since we talked about those. Which one of these resonates for you that's not number 3? Mark, please.
Yeah, I was going to say that I'm usually not patient, beyond a certain amount of time. It's 2 things. It's number 1 and number 2, where I like big goals, and then it's the patient side, like to get to that goal and just realizing when you got a big goal, it's like eating a whale. It's just a small bite at a time, and just realizing that if I can just get through that bite, the next bite will make it a little bit smaller, and then hopefully I can get it done in time. But that's basically what it boils down to for me.
Got it. Chirag mentioned a couple of weeks ago, he was talking about focus on the process, not the goal or the end. And I agree with that completely. Yes, there's nothing wrong with keeping your goals in mind. You should always keep your goals in mind, but you have to realize there's only one way to get to the goal. And that's what you're doing today, right now, and what you're going to do tomorrow. And after that, and you keep eating that one bite of that whale, and eventually the whale will be gone. So yes, we have to focus on the process and not necessarily the result. So he was suggesting, for example, if you're going to make calls to people, and let's say you set a 30-minute block, he was saying, don't say, I'm going to call 6 people during my 30 minutes. He was saying, just start calling. and call for 30 minutes. And whatever you reach is what you reach. Maybe it's 4 calls, maybe it's 6 calls, maybe it's 7 calls, but you don't have to put extra pressure on yourself for something small like that. And in a general sense, I agree completely. If we can focus on, remember, this is an important fact, folks. We all have the present, the past, the present, and the future in our lives. And we spend a lot of time reflecting on the past, and sometimes we have regrets and we're blah, blah, blah. And sometimes we're talking about the future or thinking about the future. But the only time that we have available to us ever is the present. It's this moment. So what am I doing with my time right now? Is it time efficient? Is it the right kind of thing for me to be focusing on? Is it directly related to one of my key goals? And if it is, then you could say, all right, at least you're doing the right thing. You may not be doing it perfectly. It may be taking you a little more time than you'd like it to, but you're doing the right thing. But for all of us, we need to think about, how do I focus on the process, not just the goal? Jeff, you raise your hand, please come off mute.
Yeah, David, I suffer from the affliction of always thinking I need to know more. I procrastinate like crazy. I mean, I've been in the business a long time. I know everything there is to know about it. I just don't do it because I'm always thinking, well, I don't know enough here. Or I go into the system and I'm looking at the tasks and the CRM and, oh my God, I haven't updated my systems here. And so I shouldn't be calling people yet, or I shouldn't send out an email because I don't know how to do the perfect email. I get stuck in that mode.
Very common. And, this goes way back to the beginning of psychology with Carl Jung. One of the things that he identified as an element to look at in our human cognition is our comfort with uncertainty. And so, when we have a high level of discomfort with uncertainty, we choose not to act.
Yep.
And, in general, entrepreneurs are pretty good with uncertainty. They're willing to leap in and take the chance, and somehow it'll all work out. But within that general delusional optimism, let's call it, within the business, there could be certain areas where we really hesitate, which could be making certain calls because we don't have information, or it could be handling the people side of the business because we're just not really sure how it would turn out. And so we've got a problem on our team and we don't want to deal with it or handle it because we're afraid that the conversation could go this direction, that direction. So we do nothing. It's very common. And so, for you, Jeff, and for all of us, we need to think about, what is my level of comfort with uncertainty? And is there something that I could do about that? And yes, there are. There's tons of books out there that you can read. There's tons of TED Talks and articles and things on, just that comfort with discomfort with uncertainty. And so do a little searching if you like. There's a lot out there. A lot's out there that's not necessarily helpful, but if there's anything you find on a TED Talk or in a chapter of a book or whatever that helps you, you're moving in the right direction, because it's something we all need to handle. But one more useful thing for you to think about, Jeff, would be specifically, what areas of the business am I hesitating the most? And that might indicate that you are you're most uncomfortable with uncertainty in that one particular part of business. It might be finances. It might be developing your team members. It might be diving into a new potential market or adding a new service like staging or something like that. It's probably not across the board. It's probably a couple of areas. And if you reflect on that a little bit, you identify those areas, then you might be able to talk with other people too and say, how do you handle this? How do you get through this part of the business? So there's definitely some opportunities there for you.
Great, thanks.
All right, well, we've come to the end of the half hour, everybody. So nice to be with you this morning. Thank you so much for your attention. Looking forward to seeing you again next Wednesday. We're going to continue our conversations for the next few weeks over on the remaining principles of successful agents. So we'll be kind of alternating them with the other conversations like this. As always, stay focused. Give the world what it is only you have to offer, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a great day, everybody.